The Witness podcast is created by Blake Martin. This is episode 1 of 5, Puzzles and Games, and is made from an interview with Christopher Birnbaum. This podcast contains full spoilers for the game. It's absolutely worth the experience to try it firsthand. Even if you think you've beaten the game, there may be more mysteries to discover. If you would like to be on this podcast, please contact Blake at mannamedbam. All right, so this is our little podcast about The Witness. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me sort of what the prompt for this was? What about whatever this assignment is made you want to write about The Witness, create something in relation to this?
Well, what it initially was in my critter class on the first day we did a free write. Mm-hmm. And I believe the question was, what is the most important lesson you've learned in your life? Something like that. Mm. And I ended up writing about The Witness because I've learned a lot about what it means to be a truth seeker. Mm-hmm. And a game that's kind of seemingly, just a game at a surface level has really stuck with me, and I wanted to explore why and how. So I started out trying to write a paper about the intention in the design of the game by the developers, but that seemed a little too lofty to kind of try and reach at with my own opinions influencing it. Mm-hmm. So I started to go more towards something that was based more on how people I know have perceived the game. Mm-hmm. And in learning that, I hope to understand where the design of the game excelled, where it maybe fell flat. Mm-hmm. And kind of relate it to my own experiences. I think the game does a really, really good job of providing a really difficult to articulate view in a very specific way, and I want to explore why it works for me.
Certainly a very intentional game.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Intention was a lot of what I initially sought out when I was looking into it. So I've watched a lot of old interviews with Jonathan Blow, newer interviews.
Yeah. Me too, man. Like, so many.
So many. It's always interesting to hear his thoughts on the game. And especially interesting because it had such a long development process that going back, you can hear interviews from like the first year it was being made where he kind of had this little nugget of an idea of what it might be to now when it's out and it's made millions of dollars and it's out in the world and people are experiencing it. It's really interesting to hear. What's most interesting is to hear what's stayed the same from the very beginning all the way to now, and how a lot of the things he was going for are exactly what I felt playing the game, and I think a lot of my friends feel the same way.
Yeah, I assume that we're going all spoilers.
Yes, all spoilers. Okay. There will be a big disclaimer at the beginning of every episode. Okay. So.
I know that you already know this, but for the sake of this, sort of like the initial kernel was a combination of a moment he wanted to create in a spellcaster game that he was sort of like half designing. Mm-hmm. And then answering the question of how to reliably design deep games. Mm-hmm. And so he went into I don't know the name of the fractal, but it's same inward and outward, and you can dive in forever and it's the same pattern over and over again, but it's with slight variation. Mm-hmm. I don't know the name of it. But the spellcaster idea was there at the very beginning, the moment of going up to the mountain and to the top, there's a panel that doesn't do anything at all. Mm-hmm. And then you look a little bit to the side. Hopefully, you look a little bit to the side. And then you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then you click on it. And then you have the moment of epiphany, which is sort of what the game is about. Mm-hmm. That's sort of how I think about the game. Yeah. Is like games are like really influential on us. You can turn them into Skinner boxes and turn people into like retirees sitting in front of a slot machine, you know? But this game instead uses that like sort of psychological power that games have and uses it to deliver the experience of epiphany over and over again. That's sort of like how I thought about it. And that comes through frustration. Yeah. But I think that it does it well ultimately. Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the big words, some of the big themes for me of the game are epiphany, for sure. Perspective, the unknown, mindfulness and presence, presence of mind. And I feel like they all kind of tie together to have these big kind of Zen experiences of Satori, or something that gets at Satori, which is still something I can't wrap my head around. It's kind of funny in doing all of the research that I've done for this. And I mean, I've watched countless Rupert Spira videos trying to understand non-duality. And I've watched countless Zen videos on YouTube, and I've read countless. I've tried to understand what a koan even is. But that so defies, like, the point of what a koan
Sort of.
is.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be...
Yeah, it's supposed to be like an incorrect answer that helps you lead to some greater truth.
Yeah. It's hard to think about because you're not supposed to think about it. You're supposed to experience it. And I feel like the game does a good job of putting you in a place where you're thinking about something else, and then you can totally experience a Zen experience while you're thinking about something else. I think that's kind of a beautiful thing about it.
Yes, I agree. And I definitely had some really cool moments personally, even though, like, I had it, like, partially spoiled by my own doing, but still having had that already happen, I still had lots of experiences of epiphany and of overcoming and, like, having, like, a kind of Zen, like, almost mystical experience of it, which is, like, I think what makes this game worth talking about. So I kind of want to poke... I'm just going to tell the story now of how I came upon the game.
Cool. Go for it.
So I come over to visit you, and you and Matt are there, and you guys are talking about The Witness, and you're being very vague. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? What are the Tetris pieces? Like, I don't understand. This game sounds dumb. And then you're like, no, it's about drawing lines on a panel. I don't know if you guys had beaten it fully.
I think I had at that point. When were we at Matt's? Where
it was
were
at
we?
your house.
In Jerome.
Yeah.
I think, was it this summer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Matt and I had both beaten it all the way, and we were walking someone else through parts of it or trying to help.
So, like, by beating it all the way, you mean ending and challenge and credits?
I had done the challenge. Matt, I still don't think has beaten the challenge, which speaks to how infuriating it is. You know, it really can evoke a response from anyone.
It's hard.
It's hard. Oh, that's for another time. I'm going to talk about that later. My experience with the challenge. Oof. But anyway, continue.
So you guys were like, all right, so just, like, sit down and, like, watch us play it a little bit. And so I sit down, and you're running around the island really fast, and like, oh, this is a pretty looking game, but, like, it doesn't look that interesting to me. And every little bit you would go like, Chris, close your eyes. Because Matt would, like, point something out, and you guys had found something, and I was like, all right, I'll close my eyes, and I hear a noise, and then he's like, okay, you can look now, and then we continue on. And I do want to commend you guys, because we played through 3 lasers and the top of the mountain with me, and you guys did not reveal anything. You guys kept your mouths shut about, like, everything secret in this game, which I wouldn't have been able to do myself. That was, like, a lot of what made the experience really cool for me, because I knew that there was more to this game very directly, and you guys sort of guided me on a journey to discovering the game, like, in the correct way, sort of. Of, like, I would do a few puzzles, and then I would do something, and it would be wrong, and I would be confused, and then you're like, all right. Ask yourself what the rule is. Like, what made those previous answers right? So I'm like, all right, whatever. I'll go back, and I look at my correct answers, and then eventually, like, it's like, oh, okay, like, snaps, realize it, and then everything else sort of falls into place. And that's sort of like what Jonathan Blow wants to do. He wants the distance between understanding the question and the answer to be like very small. I think that most of the areas do it really well. I think that some of the questions are totally bullshit, but still, I think that most of the game is like really good at doing that. Like really good at having like clear rules that you're just supposed to follow. And a metaphor that I sort of think about a lot when I think about this game is, I forget who said it, but it was a famous physicist, and they were talking about what it's like to be a physicist, like an astrophysicist, and trying to understand the universe, because we know so little that it's like looking at the gods play chess, and you can only see one move at a time without seeing any of the other pieces, and you don't know the rules. It's like you just see like a few pieces move here and there, and they're moving forward and like diagonally and stuff. And then you see a knight move, and it jumps like in a weird way, like a non-linear fashion, and it like throws your whole worldview off. And you're like, I thought that I understood this game, but I don't. And so like that's what kept coming to mind as I was playing the game, of it like sort of going, no, there's a clear answer. You just aren't coming to it yet. You don't understand the right answer yet. And that was sort of like what my experience was. Yeah.
Cool. What areas do you think were lacking, and why?
I don't think any of the areas themselves were lacking. I think that all of the areas had clear ideas, and those ideas were executed well. I think that the greenhouse was the hardest for me, for reasons that I still don't totally understand. Like, it's just because I don't do color that fast in my head. Like, I can't switch the colors, like, go, like, all right, so green is behaving this way in red light and whatever. Like, I find that math to be really, really hard. But I know of other people that, like, blew through it, like the Joseph Anderson video. He says that he blew through the greenhouse section in, like, an hour, and he brute forced his way through the audio section. And I went through the audio section in, like, 10 minutes total. And I brute forced my way through the last 3 solutions of the elevator in the greenhouse. Like, I got the rest of the greenhouse, but it wasn't from understanding, it was from partially luck and like guessing at like, all right, what's the like general logic of these questions, and like where have they been before, so I'm gonna guess this. And I still don't understand the colors. So yeah, like I think that there's a few things that the game doesn't do conveyance very well. I think that there's like too much information in the greenhouse generally, of like what all the color interactions are. But I think that all of the rest of the areas are really good at conveying that information. Yeah, so I think that each section does it well. I think that there's a few puzzles here and there that don't.
Cool. This whole experience is kind of about my whole playthrough of the game the first time. As I started to encounter puzzles, I mean, I didn't know what I was in for at all. I knew nothing about the game, but I wanted to learn. I mean, I feel like pretty much anybody who has played through all of this game has felt the urge to learn what the polyomino piece is the first time you see them, and they make no sense. It just looks totally foreign, but it's on this grid that you've already seen a bunch of times, and you need to know, and there's kind of a trust that somewhere on the island you're going to learn how to do it. And this happened for me on every part of the island. I saw the stars, the little flowers that you find in the jungle in the town for the first time, and I was so confused. And I tried guessing for a while, and it didn't work, obviously, but I was just itching to learn. So as I went on, I was gaining more and more knowledge and understanding a lot more of the consequences and a lot more of the nuance of drawing lines and how I could control what was happening in the puzzles, and how the starting point and the ending point could affect things, and certain easy ways to get around doing symmetry puzzles. And it's really mostly about consequences that I discovered as I was playing the game. And that kind of all these consequences started to ingrain themselves into how I was solving the puzzles until I got pretty good at dealing with all of these shapes and dealing with the line I was drawing. I got to a place where I felt like I was mastering a lot of the ideas. And it happened to time out so well that once I had this mastery, I found my way into the challenge and all of the puzzles leading up to the challenge. And I was just so hungry to do these hard puzzles because I felt like I had mastered something and there was still something left that was extremely difficult for me. And then when I got to the challenge, everything that I had learned throughout the whole game was being put to the test, and it was honestly one of the greatest experiences I've had playing a video game in my life. I've played a lot of video games. I've played a lot of different kinds of video games for a long time, and nothing has really impacted me the way this challenge did. I started the music and I immediately felt just such a rush and such a desire to get to the end of the challenge, and I had no idea what waited for me at the end. I had no idea of anything. I just wanted to solve the puzzles, and I worked on it for like a month. I was just running it like so many times a night and getting frustrated and getting worse and worse with each attempt until I started to figure some things out, and I calmed myself down, and I learned a lot of routing that would help me. I learned a lot of ways to be mindful about the puzzles I was encountering. And I eventually beat it, and I was like hyperventilating, and it was like the most true like emotional response I've ever had to anything I've ever done in a video game. And for me, it was the culmination of all of the puzzle design within the game. If I had learned these puzzles any other way, I don't know if I would have felt that way about doing this puzzle, but it was very personal to me. It didn't force feed me anything. I was just hungry, and I made a feast of it, and the challenge was like a really, really good dessert. I guess. It's not a perfect metaphor. But that's how the puzzle design impacted me in this game. And also, I love hearing Jonathan Blow talk about how people who play this game find strengths in certain areas and weaknesses in certain areas, and a lot of that is reflected within the rest of the game. You know, I wanted to improve upon my weaknesses. I don't know if there was any area that I was particularly strong in to begin with, but I feel like I had the stick-to-itiveness to keep working on the puzzles and like the hunger to figure things out on my own. So that's how these puzzles hit me. You want to talk about it, Chris? Could you tell me about your experience playing the challenge?
The challenge specifically?
Yeah.
I knew what it was going into it, which I think changes what the perception could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of it, because I watched you play it.
Uh-huh.
I watched you play the challenge, and I was utterly confused. I was like, what are the triangles even mean? But it moves fast enough like that. I couldn't have possibly... It's not spoilers, really.
Yeah.
It's the act of solving them that is the challenge,
Yeah.
not watching somebody do it. You don't gain the solution to the challenge by watching somebody play it because it's randomized.
Yeah.
I know that it took me a while. It took me quite a few tries.
Mm-hmm.
And I got really, really stuck in the maze because I couldn't figure out when it would show the puzzles, like where it decided to show the puzzles. And I found out from like a video that it's it's where the dots are.
Yeah,
on the thing.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that until I
beat
found it.
Yeah,
oh, you beat it without knowing.
I beat it without knowing that.
Yeah.
And then I saw Jonathan Blow playing it.
Yeah.
And he said that.
Yeah.
And
like,
I was
that would have been so much easier if I had known that.
Yeah.
Because then you can just run right to it, and then you're not wandering around this maze.
And it was seriously like panic attack inducing when you're running through and like in the Hall of Mountain King is playing and these doors are slamming up in your face.
Yeah.
That was so uncomfortable in a deep way.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to do it.
Yeah, you wanted to beat it. It's a challenge. I don't know. I feel like it was just sort of, it was there. I understood what it was mostly asking me. I already knew that some of the puzzles were impossible, so you had to figure out which ones were real. Mm-hmm. And so, like, a lot of, like, sort of the understanding what the challenge is even trying to do part was I already knew it. And so it took me not as many tries. I feel like there's still a lot to be gained from doing the challenge at all, because it's expressing mastery over the mechanics. It's the only part of the game that replayably proves your mastery of not understanding just the puzzles, but how to understand how to solve them and solve them quickly.
Yeah. There's some puzzles in the town that I had a really hard time with on my first playthrough. And now I look back and I remember the specific way I had to think to get beyond them.
Yes,
rather than truly understanding the concept in that moment. Even if I look back and I'm like, oh, I don't exactly remember how to do this one, but I remember basically how I was thinking when I did it. I remember the concept that it was trying to get across.
Yeah, and then that would quickly. Yeah, and then that allows you, once you understand fully the concept, it's really easy to do. And I think that it's interesting that, like, some people think that, like, some of the puzzles are totally bullcrap. And I feel like that has a lot to do with either them perceiving it to be arbitrary or perceiving it to be, or like them thinking that it's not conveyed well, or them thinking that the idea itself is bad. And for me, it's the audio puzzle in the town. I hate that puzzle. I still hate that puzzle. I think it's the worst, one of the worst puzzles in the game. I was actually curious if you had any puzzles that you're like, this is bullcrap, like, or something close to it. None.
I don't think there's any, because I wasn't looking to be handed. I mean, if there was any possible way that I could figure it out, I was happy. And that particular audio puzzle in the basement where the speaker's broken, I hadn't done the audio puzzles yet, or maybe I had. I knew I had to do something with the speaker. I saw the speaker. I was like, well, it's disassembled. That has to mean something. This looks like a sound wave, I guess. Maybe if I do low, low, high, high, then it'll work. And then if I do it on this one too, it'll work. Oh, it worked. And I just kind of accidentally did it right. So there was a way to kind of intuit what it was asking from you, even though it didn't seem to give you enough to go on. That it was just kind of a layer of abstraction beyond transcribing audio and having a cell phone go off in the middle of it. It was just the next layer of difficulty, I think. And that's how it struck me. I can see how it seems unfair, but I feel like it was supposed to.
Yeah, I even, like, it's not that I don't think that it's delineatable. I understand, like, what the solution is now after the fact, but I don't. It's me not thinking that it was conveyed well. Yeah. Like, I think the last monastery puzzle wasn't conveyed well with the broken branch.
Yeah, that one took forever. I think that's one that I just guessed in the game. One of like three.
That's one of the few puzzles that I looked up because I was stuck for a really long time. Looked it up, but this is like, I'm very different in that, like, for like all of my childhood, I looked up the guides. I didn't really care about solving the puzzles. I liked looking at the areas, and I liked seeing what concepts that they were doing and like what they were trying to accomplish. I didn't really care about solving any of the puzzles at all because I didn't think I was good at problem solving, so I just didn't do it. And like this game and Super Metroid were the first games where I looked at almost no guides. Super Metroid, I think I looked up one guide to an area, and it turned out that I just had to get good and actually fight the enemies. I had to go back and like farm missiles because I had run out of missiles in this one area. That was like the solution. Get good, idiot. I thought there was like a different way out. And then in this game, there were a few puzzles that I looked up the solution. I get a lot more out of video games now that I haven't been. Now that I haven't been looking up the guides, I get a lot more out of them.
Yeah, I've felt that way playing through Breath of the Wild recently. Like in the past, I haven't made it through a Zelda game just because it got kind of hard, or I didn't know exactly where to go, or
they
I
can
set
be
it
pretty
aside.
obtuse.
I set it aside for 2 weeks, and it didn't tell you what your objective was.
Yeah.
And so then you have to talk to every NPC everywhere because you don't know where you even started.
Yep.
That's why I never finished Wind Waker. But playing Breath of the Wild, I've just been kind of content to explore. And the way the game happens to be designed is you have these huge objectives that you know you need to do at some point, and then everything else is just fun to do. And like it's like, I know I need to go there, it's on my map, I'm gonna walk straight. Even if I walk straight there from where I am, I'm gonna find like 20 cool things to do on my way there. And I feel like the design of that game has helped me be able to play it without any guides or not get lost or anything. It's just, and then the big objectives happen to be really fun too. It's all really good.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to playing it because this will be the first Zelda game that I'm going to be playing, and I'm going to, I hope not look at any guides at all, because I hope that it's not too hard. It's probably not going to be too hard for me. I don't know. I feel like after playing Hollow Knight, I'm just broken. I've like, the bosses in that were so difficult for me. They're like the hardest bosses in any video game that I've played, and there's like 50 bosses. Every power-up has a boss, and they're all like in secret, like little nooks and crannies. Like, I feel like I've just gotten generally better at video game combat, so I hope that like it all comes together to me being good enough at video games that I can just play Breath of the Wild no problem.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been playing video games differently since I played The Witness.
Oh, so differently. So differently.
Like Steven's sausage roll.
Yeah.
I'm very stuck. I've been stuck for 5 months on one puzzle. But I will not let myself look it up because I've been similarly stuck on puzzles before in that game. And it felt so good to solve them. And 5 months worth of that kind of build up, I can't even imagine. But maybe I'll never solve it, but I want to.
I still haven't looked up the solution, the Great Tower. That's where I was stuck.
Oh, yeah. That's a great puzzle. That's a really great puzzle. Yeah, that one took me forever. And then there's some in the...
I talked to Matt about it, and he said that I'm on the right track, because I understand what it's asking of me. I need to figure out how to mechanically do it, because I don't understand the rolling mechanics yet at all.
It's a lot, but kind of more beautifully than I've experienced it in any other game. That game, like, I developed sort of a similar thing in The Witness, like a mastery. Once you develop like a mastery of the mechanics, you kind of realize it doesn't give you leeway, but it gives you all the time in the world to do everything that you need to do. It's like
should I go find out what that is?
Yeah, there's a beeping. I think it's in the kitchen. Okay, I'll finish talking about Steven's sausage roll. So, in Steven's sausage roll, you do one input at a time, and that's either walking forwards or backwards or turning, and that's kind of all you can do, but there's a lot of nuance to it as you go on. So it gives you a lot of leeway as far as time to think, but a lot of the puzzles need to be done in such a specific way that you need that time to think. Probably all the puzzles, you need that time to think. There's not a lot of leeway in terms of how the puzzles can be solved, which kind of leads to a gameplay style where you need to develop mastery over the few things that you can do and understand all the consequences of what you do. And that's kind of become the type of gameplay that I love. When I was a kid, I only liked action games. I mean, I could never get into Tetris because I didn't want to think for some reason, which is weird because I've always been more of a thinker than a doer in my life. But in games, for a long time, I loved the time pressure of like fighting an enemy right now, and you have to dodge at the perfect time and you have to react. And I've loved playing Super Smash Brothers because it's a lot of that, but you're doing it with a real person rather than like a Zelda enemy that's gonna charge up and you have to hit it while it's charging up and it's red eye. And Melee is just a better expression of reaction but then also layers of understanding people. So I grew up that way, but since I've played The Witness, I have loved kind of deliberate action and really thinking through a lot of problems.
Sorry.
My mom was gone.
No, she was asking if we were still recording. He wants to play the harp.
Okay. That's funny.
All right.
I already told my mystery story. Do you have any other questions about...
Do you want to re-talk that last sentence because of the door creak, or do you not care?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Do you have any other things that I said during my puzzles and game design story that you want to bring up or talk about?
Where did we stop?
Like before we went to turn off the timer?
No, yeah, right before we went to turn off the timer.
So I was talking about Steven's sausage roll, and we've been
Right.
talking about how The Witness has kind of influenced the way we play other games.
Yeah.
So I was talking about like deliberate sort of play over like deliberate and slow kind of play, very thoughtful play, as opposed to like what I grew up loving, which was like, here's Metroid, I gotta kill all these enemies and run away, and and kind of more action based.
Yeah. Are you talking about like Prime?
I grew up playing the 2D ones,
Okay.
like Zero Mission and Fusion. And I loved that, and I loved stuff like that, and I loved
And
racing
Fusion's
games.
particularly combat based, right?
Yeah, it's fairly combat based, and there's a lot of different kinds of enemies, and like all the power ups, like in any Metroid game, help you get to the next place. And a lot of the places, I think it's pretty linear as opposed to other Metroid games where you can basically get anywhere. But you kind of start out in an area and you're kind of weak to what's there, and then you gain a power, and then it's no problem. But like when I was a kid, I didn't like RPGs at all. I've never beaten a Poke game, but I've gotten really
They're
into
scooter
Earthbound.
boxes. I don't like Pokemon games very much at all.
But kind of more in my adult life, I've gotten into Earthbound a lot, and a lot of it's because of the quirk and charm, and the story is fun. But also, I do love the battle system because it's both very thoughtful, it's slow and thoughtful, and then it has moments of frantically mashing or frantically menuing, and like, you need to attack right now, or you need to use this healing item right now, or your health counter is gonna roll down too fast. And I love that combination. It's kind of a combination of action-based gameplay that I loved as a kid and more thoughtful play that I like now.
Do you like the Earthbound combat system?
Yeah.
The
Mother 3.
What am I trying to say? The Undertale.
Undertale, yeah.
Undertale combat system.
Undertale is kind of a similar idea.
Where it's bullet hell.
Even though it's totally different
Yeah.
from Earthbound, it has an action element to it.
Yeah.
But you also have to think about your different options that you have. And it gives you some time to do that. And that was just a great game. And the story and the quirk and the charm.
The everything of that game.
The game, wow. Yeah, anything else I talked about like learning the puzzles or...
Not that I can think of right now.
Okay.
I love the 2D Metroids.
Yeah.
I love all the Metroid games that I've played. Thank you for listening. The Witness podcast is created by Blake Martin. If you would like to be on this podcast, please contact Blake at Man Named Bam.